Matt Wallaert, Start at the End, How to Build Products That Create Change. In Start at the End, How to Build Products That Create Change, Matt Wallaert dives into the heart of the intervention design process, IDP, to help organizations identify gaps between the ideal and real worlds and create effective products. IDP guides the reader through assessment, insight validation, pressure mapping, and constructing behavioral statements, before diving into ethical checks and pilot studies. Learn how the author applied these techniques while working with Microsoft on Bing, and get inspired to apply them to your own ventures.
The Intervention Design Process. The book introduces the intervention design process, IDP, as a way of modifying potential consumers' behavior. The IDP starts with a potential insight that is a perception of a gap between the real world and the ideal world. To validate the insight, quantitative or qualitative data is required. The book illustrates this through the example of Bing's search engine for schools. The team suspected a gap between the real world and the ideal world because children were using the search engine less than expected. The team validated their insight by collecting quantitative and qualitative data, which proved the gap's existence. Validation of the insight allows a team to proceed to the next step of the IDP. Writing a behavioral statement. Creating a formal description for an ideal world you want to create involves crafting a behavioral statement with 5 components: the behavior being promoted, the target population, motivation, preconditions, and metrics for measuring progress. Creating a vision of an ideal world requires an articulate description of the intended behaviors. This is referred to as a behavioral statement, which includes 5 critical components. Initially, you will need to identify the intended behavior, which usually revolves around the use or purchase of your product or service. For instance, Uber's behavioral goal upon launching was to encourage people to take an Uber. The second component is the target population's identification, which may be specific age groups or broad demographics. The third component is the motivation driving the desired behavior. In Uber's case, it was the desire to get from one place to another. However, it is essential to remain realistic when developing the behavioral statement. There are specific preconditions that must be in place before the intended behavior can occur. For instance, during Uber's initial launch, people needed smartphones with internet connectivity and an electronic form of payment to make use of their ride services. The final step is to define the metrics for measuring whether the intended behavior is taking place. In Uber's case, that was the number of rides people took with their service. To synthesize the 5 components of the behavioral statement, you could turn it into a single sentence. For Uber, the behavioral statement looked like this: when people want to get from point A to point B, and they have a smartphone with connectivity and an electronic form of payment and live in San Francisco, they will take an Uber, as measured by rides. In summary, crafting a behavioral statement involves identifying target behaviors, populations, motivations, preconditions, and metrics for gauging progress towards an ideal world. Pressure mapping, an example with M&Ms. This book excerpt explains the concept of pressure mapping, a process that involves identifying promoting and inhibiting factors that affect people's behavior. The author uses M&M candies as an example to illustrate the power of irrational promoting pressures, such as colors, and the impact of inhibiting pressures, including availability and nutritional content. This passage sets the stage for the next part, where the complex relationship between calories and behavior is explored, showing the importance of careful pressure mapping to achieve desired behavioral outcomes. The contextual complexity of promoting and inhibiting pressures. The branding, cost, and other contextual factors impact the promoting and inhibiting pressures of products like M&Ms. These pressures can also be counterrational and are always context-dependent. To adequately map out these pressures, empirical research and evidence-based validation are necessary, as relying on intuitions or assumptions may lead to inaccurate conclusions. Mapping behavior pressures. To promote or inhibit a behavior, we must understand the pressures behind it. Mapping out these pressures helps to see the balance of forces. By taking the example of low Black community flu shot rates, the author explains how promoting and inhibiting pressures affect behavior. While promoting pressures were weak, strong inhibiting pressures from past medical injustices increased distrust in the flu shot. Understanding these pressures is crucial to changing behavior. Shifting the balance of power. In order to promote a target behavior, it is important to alter the balance of power between the inhibiting and promoting pressures. This can be achieved by decreasing the inhibiting pressures or increasing the promoting pressures. To accomplish this, one must intervene in the existing reality by coming up with ideas for possible interventions. The best way to do this is to combine interventions to create win-win solutions. In the example of Clover Health, the author and his team came up with 20 possible interventions, later narrowed down to 5 by combining ideas. Their successful intervention involved reaching out to church leaders to talk to their congregations about the benefits of flu shots. The key takeaway is to identify combinatory solutions to shift the balance of power in favor of the desired behavior. Conducting an ethical check. Before implementing any behavior-changing interventions, it is crucial to conduct an ethical check. This involves asking important questions such as whether the behavior matches the goals and motivations of the population being targeted, whether the benefits outweigh the costs, and whether transparency is being maintained in research methods and motivations. Manipulating people into doing something that goes against their best interests is unethical and must be avoided. Ultimately, all behavior-changing interventions must prioritize the well-being of the target population. Conducting an ethical check on interventions. Before implementing any interventions, it's crucial to conduct an ethical check. Just like with your target behavior, it's essential to ensure that your interventions match your target population's goals and motivations, that the benefits outweigh the costs, and that you're being transparent in your determination. An untruthful scare letter to convince people to get a flu shot may seem like a quick fix, but it's an unethical intervention. When determining if your possible interventions are ethical, ask the same questions you did with your target behavior, be transparent with your methods and motivations, and avoid being devious to make the benefits look like they outweigh the costs. By conducting an ethical check on both your target behavior and possible interventions, you're on your way to the last step of the IDP and finally testing out your ideas. Testing interventions, the pilot phase. When testing out interventions, it's crucial to start with pilot studies before rolling them out on a large scale. This allows for a thorough testing of different interventions and avoids wasting resources on ineffective ones. Pilots involve testing interventions with a small sample size of the target population in an operationally dirty way. The goal is to see if the interventions work, and data analysis is key in determining the most effective intervention. If you've created potential interventions for promoting a certain behavior, it's essential to thoroughly test them before implementing them on a larger scale. Jumping the gun and immediately rolling them out nationwide or internationally could be disastrous if they fail. Additionally, with limited resources, implementing all interventions simultaneously isn't feasible. Thus, starting with pilot studies is crucial. Pilot studies allow for intervention testing with a small sample size of the target population in an operationally dirty manner. In other words, interventions aren't implemented in the most efficient way possible but rather in a way that minimizes disruption to the organization. This might include manual processes where automated systems would eventually be used. Ultimately, the goal of pilot studies is to determine which intervention works most effectively. This is done by analyzing data gathered during the testing phase. By starting with smaller tests, you can avoid wasting time, energy, and money on ineffective interventions. The next and final part of this summary will delve further into data analysis and its importance in intervention testing. The practical guide to conducting an IDP test. After conducting a pilot study to test an intervention, and obtaining a p-value of less than 0.20, it's time to conduct a larger sample test to confirm the results. By implementing the intervention in an operationally clean way, you can determine its overall feasibility and cost-effectiveness. The final step is to perform a cost-benefit analysis and determine which intervention to pursue and scale.
By following the guidance in Matt Wallaert's Start at the End, readers can skillfully navigate the complex IDP with ease and expertise. Through practical exercises like pressure mapping, the creation of behavioral statements, and designing interventions based on solid insights and shared values, the reader can develop an understanding of how to create impactful changes by transforming their insights into reality. With the importance of ethical considerations and real-world examples such as the Clover Health case, this book proves to be a powerful tool for driving success in product design and innovation.